So welcome to another games tips and tricks video. So it's a long time now since I've done a video, so I thought I'd do one on creating this simple foliage. So I'll probably do it in a couple of different parts. I will start with this one here, just this very simple fern. So you can see like it looks pretty nice, has a subsurface translucency and a little bit of a wind effect, and that's just driven very simply through a material function in Unreal's material editor. So it's a very basic plant, but it actually looks pretty good, and one of the reasons why it looks so good is because I'm using Megascans for my texture. So just have a quick look at Megascans. So these are Megascan atlases, and they're releasing more and more of these. You can get some free ones here, or you can join up and you get I think it's, I don't know, 30 a month or something. I can't remember what it is. It's a while since I used the service, but yeah, so these are the atlases. Basically, if you know anything about texture atlasing, it's just a way of using a single texture sheet with multiple different components on it, and then overlaying your UVs on different elements, like in this case the different leaves or fronds, or if it was a building you might have a door here, a wall here, floor here, or whatever, and you'd break up the UVs and overlay them over that atlas. It's just a method of environment texturing. So these are the, as I say, the Megascans atlases, and this is what I'm going to be using. But if you're not using these, the older, well, not the older, but it's still used, but this is the same method. But with the Megascans you get all the textures for free, so the opacity, the roughness, the normal, the whole lot. Whereas if you do it this way, you have to make your own. So you might get a cutout like this, then create an alpha, and then create your other maps from that. Maybe your normal map in Photoshop plug-in or something, and then your roughness. The old school sort of way of doing it, I suppose you could say. So yeah, that's what you'd grab if you weren't using, or else you could just cut your own out with the pen tool and magic wand and whatever, and derive your alpha from that, which is your opacity mask, which is obviously very important for this kind of workflow, because it's just flat, two-sided sort of planar geometry that's put together to give the illusion of that it's actually a 3D object. It looks pretty good, even though it's just single-sided geometry with a two-sided material. So I'm going to start the process in Max. Once you have your textures and everything, you're ready to go. So in Max here, I just have a standard material set up, and I've just grabbed the albedo. I'll just actually show you what you get here. For instance, with the atlas, so this would be just a preview of the atlas itself. You wouldn't be using that, and these are all the textures. So we'll be using albedo, normal map, the opacity mask, the roughness, and this translucency map to give us that subsurface effect. So I've just grabbed the albedo and the opacity map and just dragged them into a standard material here in the opacity slot and the diffuse color slot, just to visualize it while we're setting this up in Max. And I've also what I like to do is I've just exported the Unreal Baseman. I have them here in the cell scene asset loader here, and I can just pop him into the scene, and he's already set up to scale, obviously, because he came from UE. But you also want to make sure, and going to UE, that you have your units set up correctly. So a lot of people make the mistake of just setting up the display unit scale, metric and centimeters, but you want to set up your system unit scale as well. So 1 unit equals 1 centimeter, and that's exactly what Unreal operates on as well. So this just gives us a quick idea of what size we might want the plant to be. It's no big deal, you can always scale it up at any stage in the process, but it's good to build things to scale from the get-go. So I'm just going to press F into the front view, Z to zoom, and I'm just going to grab a plane, and I'm just going to roughly sort of the length that I might want the frond to be, or the leaf, or whatever the hell it's called. Yeah, so let's say for instance that's the size we want, and I'm going to set it up with 4 and 4 here, just so you can shape it a little bit. Now this is going to be dependent on, you know, the poly count you want. So you could just have it, you know, one edge going through here and just bend it slightly that way, and that'll cut down massively on your poly count. Or it all depends really, you know, because these are instances in the engine. It's not going to use up a whole lot of calls, because you're only using one material, one mesh, and one set of textures, and they're just instance, so they've already been called by the engine, so they don't have to keep being called again. But there's still going to be an overhead, the higher the poly count and the more that are in the scene, so just something to be aware of. So I'm going to set it up though with 4 and 4, and you can just hide him now, and I'll just zero that out, and let's go back to the front view, FZ, and I'm just going to pop the pivot down. Sorry, it had to be, it didn't work on a primitive, it had to be nettable poly. So now I can just zero that out again, and the first thing now you want to do is you've got the 4x4, and then we want to apply that, and you can see here that G to get rid of the grid. You can see here that it's trying to just map that onto the default UV coordinates, which ain't good. And here's the thing with Atlasin. So I'm just going to select the albedo and show here. Thing with Atlasin is we want to select the vert, and we want to scale this in. And you can just look over here in the viewport, and I'm just using the multi-component freeform mode, so that you can scale, rotate, and move at the same time. So just get that lined up here. If the texture looks strange to you, it's because this is like a dilation from MIP mapping. So if this was just black or white in the background, as textures get MIPed, the further you get away, it'll bleed over the edge, and you want it to bleed into a color that's suitable to the texture, so you won't see a black or a white line around it. So that looks pretty good there. So the thing about this as well is these are 4K textures, so I wouldn't be using these in a game. You might use a giant Atlas 4K for loads of things, but 4K takes up a huge amount of memory. So you know, this is a JPEG, the image I'm using here. So even though it's 4K, it's only under 2 megs, which is tiny. But generally, I'd use TGAs, or some people use PNGs in the engine. So it depends on what you're doing. But you know, for creating the plant here, I'm going to create it just with one particular type of leaf. So you know, you could duplicate this whatever amount of times and align it to all these. And as with that in 3D, the more variation you have in anything, the more realistic it's going to look, the more believable it's going to be. So for this example, I'm just going to do it with a single leaf here, but and the UVs, because I'm going to be cloning this one to create the plant just from a single one. These UVs are automatically going to be stacked exactly on top of the original when you clone them. So that's called stacking UVs. And then if you wanted to, once they were all stacked, you could grab, say, whatever amount of random leaves in the viewport here, and then the UVs will be highlighted. Then just grab the UVs away and then align them to a different leaf, or even two different, or whatever amount you want, and you get more variation that way. It's simple to do once the whole thing is set up. I might just show that at the end. So I'm just gonna collapse that now, and that's pretty much the UVs done. And you might want to just move some of these verts around. So I'm just going to turn on preserve UVs, and you can just move some of these verts around. So I'll just grab these and scale these. Now this isn't always necessary, but you know, the closer it sort of matches up here, with the underlying texture and opacity map, the better it'll be for dithering, which you know is transparency in game engines. Sometimes dithering can be a problem, especially if parts might be overlapping. So that's pretty good there, and a bit more true to the shape. So another thing that's important is smoothing groups, and it depends what type of foliage you're doing. Like if you're doing grass, you might want to, or trees, definitely with trees, depending on how complex the plant is, you might want to edit the normals. So I might show that in a future video, but we won't need to do it for this one here because it's quite simple. The normals are going to be pointing pretty naturally where they're going. So next we're going to shape this. So I'll just grab a bend modifier, and I want to bend it along the Y, I think it is. Sorry, on the X, and minus 90. So you can see there, that's why I gave that extra couple of segments. And you could even get rid of these two and just bend it in the middle. It's just to give it a bit more sort of believability. And then we can add another bend on top of that, and that'll be minus 90 as well, and give that a bit more of a bend. And this is the reason as well that you want to put the pivot right down at the bottom and in the center here, because it just, I'm going to move it now so that it's in the center of the mesh, but I'm going to move it over so it's right in the center of the twig there, because that's where we'll be rotating from. So this is non-destructive at this stage, so you can adjust those bends or whatever you want to do all the way down. But personally, I'm just gonna collapse the stack. And if I just go back to the front view again now, and hierarchy panel effect pivot, and I'm just going to manually line that up there, eyeball it, and make sure we're alright in here, and pretty good there actually. And I'll just X that out again, and front, and we're centered up, world space here, 0, 0, 0. So the next thing I want to do here is the wind that you saw earlier on is controlled. It's derived from the vertex colors on the mesh. So it also, if you're working in speed tree, if you bring custom meshes in, it will also derive the wind animation from vertex normals as well. So I'm just gonna type in VRD, or you can also just press X, a handy shortcut. Max, if you press X and whatever you type in, it'll come up there. I always forget to use it though. So vertex weld, not what I want, so I'll just show it now. And vertex paint, and it's not coming up. Paint, vertex paint modifier, and this just opens this floating dialog here, and I can just show those shaded there, and you can see it's all white at the moment. The vertex colors are all white. So I'm just going to go into verts, and I'm going to use the green channel from the vertex map in Unreal. So firstly I'm going to just flood the whole lot with black, and the way this works is I'll just select all those verts and bucket them. So the way it works, black isn't affected, and then green is affected 100%. Black is not affected at all. So we want to have a sort of a gradient, a vertex color gradient from bottom to top. So when the wind is blowing through here, you know, the top is obviously going to move more in the wind than the bottom, and in fact the bottom isn't going to move at all. So now if I grab these, and I can just come to green and just pick quite a dark color, a dark green, and flood them, probably even a darker one actually, go a bit darker than that, and flood that, and then we can just slightly more, flood that, and then I'll just make this sort of a brighter green. So then we have a nice gradient here, from black at the bottom up to that green. And that's pretty much it. Then we can collapse the vertex paint, and if you're worrying about your textures, you can just right click object properties and just come in here to vertex channel display, just untick that, and that'll give us back our material. You can just show material in viewport, and you know, this is only really here in Max, obviously to line up the UVs, but as well as that to you know, to build out the plant here so that we get a visual display of what's going on, and also if they're clipping or intersecting, we can adjust them. So I'm just going to rotate, and our pivot is still at the bottom here, and just hold down shift. And what I might do there first actually is I'm going to rotate that down more, and scale it in smaller, and can rotate that around, and probably just make maybe 4 copies. And this is completely in fact I'll make 5. It's completely up to you, you know, whatever way you want to do this. The amount of leaves you want to use, what way to rotate it, how many different types you use. As I say, the more variation the better. So you can kind of build out, and you can see here, because our pivot point is right at the bottom, they're all nicely kind of lined up at the bottom here, and it just makes it easier to build it out. You know, at this stage as well, you could come into local mode here, and you know, you could start rotating them different angles, but I'm going to do that at the end. You know, we can just grab all these now and shift drag them up, and okay, a copy, and then rotate them, switch back to view, rotate them there, kind of offset them a bit, and we can scale them, you know, scale them up slightly, you know, and on any stage, I say, you can feel free to adjust all these. I might just go up one more, and maybe rotate them again, and then we can just, you know, delete some of these top ones. and then just, you know, start to rotate just to give them a bit more variation. You know, I can even come in individually, scale them, or even grab some of these and, you know, rotate them. Even grab the center here and rotate them more freely. All the time just checking around. So I'm going to mess around with that for a few minutes, just arranging them. All I'm doing is moving, rotating, scaling, just arranging them into a shape that I'm happy with. Alright, back in the... Right, so I've just moved a few things around, nothing too crazy. I didn't spend that much time on, a couple of minutes maybe. But you know, you want to grab one of these now and just come to attach and Control A and just attach everything together. And let's go to the front, and you can see the likes of these bits here. You can still adjust this at the element level, but your pivot's going to be up here. So you could just go up to here, hierarchy, and yeah, use working pivot, and then it'll be back down here. So you might want to just make your final adjustments before you collapse everything there, and you lose all your pivots. So if I just select these elements here at the bottom, Control I to invert, and I might just move them down a bit more, just so they're not that far away. You could also, depending on the detail you want to go into, or the type of plant you're making, if there's more of the stem shown, or the branch or the twig or whatever, you could actually, like, you're not going to see that in there, that's not going into the ground. But if you were going to be able to see it, you could just build that as part of the model. And I might do another part and show a more complex sort of model. You can see here now what I was talking about. It's tiny, so you might want to scale it up. As I say, you can always do this in Unreal, or even vary the scale in the foliage painter. But it helps to just have it right from max, so that when you bring it into Unreal, it's decent enough, the proper scale as it is. So I'll just hide that bloke. Now, so let's say, yeah, we're happy with that. It's a single mesh, and now you want to reset the X form. So I just have that script there, smart reset X form, or you can just reset X form here, and the utilities panel reset selected, and then just collapse that. Or there's also the modifier in here as well, X form modifier. So X form, I have it here as well. No, I took it out because I have the script here. But you always want to reset your X form, especially when you've finished your model. You're going to be moving on to UVs or rigging or whatever. You always want to reset your X form, even during modeling. Anytime you rotate or scale a mesh at object level, it's going to mess up the pivot point. So you want to collapse it back down by resetting the X form. It's like zeroing out the transforms. You can move things around at the sub-object level, and it won't affect the X form, but it's always a good habit to get into, to just keep you know, reset it every so often as you work, especially if you're doing things like symmetry and whatnot. So that's that done now. Now if I just open up the UVs, you can see what I was saying here about, I'll just actually put it over that side, element mode and F2. You can see here, if I drag this away, they're all stacked on top of each other, as I was saying earlier on. So if I select all of them, they're all here. So I'll just display that and go to vert mode. And as I was saying there, you can grab some of them, like I've made some of them smaller. They're not that much smaller, but So say for instance this one here, I can drag that away and scale it down, and then just move it into position here. You can see now it's a different leaf, but obviously that's not good the way I just kind of lumped it over there. And you can see here, see the UVs are bleeding over on the side. So if I just grab the scale and just scale it in, and that solves it. And on that side, I'm just going to actually go to vert so I can see what's going on. These are quite close together. So you could just you know, move them over here, align some of them up a bit better, or else you can use I know not in 2017. There's a painty brush move tool, so I'm not going to spend too long doing this, but you can just scale some of these into position, just so they're not getting clipped or bleeding onto the other ones. So I'm going to just scale these, and you know, I could have grabbed 2 or 3 of them and just did all this in one go, but it was more just to show you an example. I'm not going to spend more time doing that, but you could do that with all these, overlay them on all these if you wanted to. So I'll just collapse that back down to bake those UVs, and I'm just going to add one more unwrap and switch to map channel 2, and we can just say move, it doesn't matter. Map channel 2 is going to be UV channel 1 in Unreal, which is the light map UVs. So I'm just going to move them all over, select everything, and then just say pack custom, and I'm using this poly unwrapper, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pack it with this with a bit more padding, leave enough padding around it for light map UVs, and that's it. That's all you have to do. That's the light map UVs done. So all you're doing there, sorry I might have went over a bit quick, just add your unwrap. Your other UVs are already baked in. They're baked in on channel 1, so here they are here. But if I switch over to 2 and say abandon, which it sounds a bit drastic, but all you're doing is leaving this UV unwrap and moving to the next one. So there you can see both sets of UVs are actually baked in. So that's it done there now. So we have our vertex colors painted. If we go to object properties and display it, you can see there that our vertex colors are painted. It's just the texture is still shown here, so if I tell that not to show, you can see there's our vertex colors. So object properties, vertex display, okay, and display our texture again. So that's it, finished now. UVs are done, light map UVs are done, vertex painting is done, and that's pretty much it. So then you can just export selected, and I had it saved here earlier on. I'm just going to save this as fern 2, because I had it, I made one earlier on, and I'm not exaggerating, but the first one that I made earlier on when I wasn't yapping and very rusty on me video tutorials, it only took me probably 10 minutes from modeling it, from the stage I'm at now before putting it into Unreal. It probably only took 10 minutes. So I can just save it out there, smoothing groups on, don't worry about the rest of the stuff, it's grand. So that's that exported, and now if I come back into Unreal, so back on Unreal now, I'm just going to bring the assets in. So I've just created a folder here, an empty folder, and there's a couple of different ways to import here. You can import, right click here and import, import asset, or I always have my folders open on my second monitor, and I just drag, and when you drag in there, you just make sure you have that little box with the plus, and that'll drag in there for you. And I'll just drag the model in as well. And I'll just drag the model in and get our import options. And you don't have to worry about many of these, depending on what you have set up. Untick those two, they'll probably be on by default, and untick generate light map UVs, because remember we have them sorted out already. And just import all, and that's our static mesh, and we can just double click on that, open it in the editor, and at the moment you can see obviously it's single-sided geometry, so until we put our material on, which is two-sided, it's going to look ropey. So with that done, I was going to show the process of building the material from start to finish, but I think I've already built it earlier on there, so I might just show what I've done, because it's quite simple. You know, there's not really much to it. Even the simple grass wind is easy to set up. So just a quick note first. I didn't usually I'd channel pack, or if I was exporting from say Painter, it's automatically channel packed. It's just a way of saving draw calls, where you see these texture sample nodes have the different channels exposed, so you can pack grayscale images into these other empty channels. So it just means you could pack 4 textures into one texture sample, so that's only one draw call rather than 4. So as I said, I didn't do it for this, but I usually would, and that's the same as well with a normal texture. The blue channel gets dropped by the shader, so you could drop a map in there if you wanted as well. It's just the only thing about that is normal map uses its own compression, and also due to the compression of these channel pack textures, you may or may not notice a bit of degradation, but I haven't really experienced it myself. So one thing to note as well, for any grayscale textures, if you just double click on it, you want to set the compression to masks, and that'll also knock off your sRGB. So any grayscale images and normal maps will be linear, so they will not be sRGB. And you can just save that, and if you import any map, normal map that has an N within the name, or normal within the name, it'll automatically ask you down here. So that just means that it's going to uncheck sRGB and set it to normal map compression. Similarly with the opacity map, it doesn't seem to matter there. It's sRGB, but it's a mask here, so there's no real there's only 2 values, black and white. There's no values in between that, so it doesn't really matter. Let me see. Right, so I'm just gonna that's the original plant, so I'll double click this again, and what I did here was just select it all. You can just basically you can just drag textures straight in. Right, so I'm going to now that I have this opened up here, I'm just going to go back into Fern 2, and this material now that I've already set up will work on this plant as well, because it's using the same textures. So I'm just going to drag that into the scene, spacebar to cycle through the transform manipulators, F to frame in, and also you can just if you press F on a selected object in the scene, it'll frame in on that, and it'll also allow you to rotate around the pivot of that object. It's just handy to when you're working on particular things. So I'll go back into fern 1 and I'm just going to grab this material and just drag it onto this. I can see now it's already set up, so it works fine, as I say, because it's using the same maps. So I'll just run over the material quickly. So first thing to do when you create the material, so you're just going to right click here, material, and then that'll be your material there, and then you'll double click that and you'll just get an empty material node here, master node, and I'll just delete that, force delete, and that's what you'll get then. And then when you drag all your textures in, they'll just come in as samples stacked on top of each other, nodes stacked on top of each other, and then you'll go about the business of hooking them all up. So you know, if people are already used to the basics of the editor, this is simple stuff. And we'll just bring the normal map down there. So yeah, albedo here into base color, and then with that master material, the most important thing to set up with this is you want to change the blend mode from opaque to masked, because we're using a mask, and that'll open up the opacity mask channel here, and then change the shading mode to two-sided. On older versions of Unreal it's called two-sided foliage, but it's the same thing. So make sure to change that shading mode to two-sided, and also check the two-sided box, because if I uncheck that, it's not going to be two-sided, which might be confusing even though the shading model is two-sided, but that's just about the shader getting shaded. So if it's not two-sided, it's only going to be getting shaded on the forward facing normals, and that's all you have to do for that. And this will also open up a subsurface color, and so we have our albedo piped into the base color, our opacity mask into the opacity mask slot, our normal just goes in as normal as well, and the translucency map it goes into subsurface color. So if you don't have a translucency map, you can just drag this in here and multiply that by a constant. So I could just hold down 1, hold down M and click, just shortcuts to bring those up, you know, and then you could just multiply this by a value here and pipe that into subsurface. If you don't have a translucency map, you can just do it here within the editor, and then you can just set that to a value, and that'll multiply this texture here by this constant here. So I have a translucency, or you could make a translucency map really easy in Photoshop, or you can also, some people just use solid colors and multiply those in, or else add them through this. So I have the map in this case, so I'm just gonna drive it in there. And now for the wind, this is very simple as well. This material function here, if you just right click and start typing, it'll filter it out there, and there it's there, simple wind. And you can also type up here, or you can also just pull out from a connection, and then it'll open that up as well. So whichever of those ways to do it. So simple grass wind, basically we have the wind intensity, which is just a constant. So if I hold down 1 and click anywhere here, that'll give us that. And you can also parametrimize these, so convert to a parameter, and then that'll be my default value. There's 0.2 there for the wind strength, and these parameters are from material instances, which are absolutely brilliant in Unreal. And I would always make an instance of a material. I didn't do it in this case, but once you expose these parameters, they'll become available in the instance. So let's say, for instance, I just create material instance, and yeah, that'll do there. It has an instance at the end here. If I open that, you can see that it's different than a material editor, but it'll have these parameters available. So I'm just going to close that down. So this parameter here, you would call it something. So in this case we just call it you know, wind intensity, and then you can set it to a group. So we could just call it wind, and that's in the wind group. And then if I apply that and open up the instance again, you can see here now that we have a wind parameter here exposed. So you can turn that on, and then I can set this to 1, and then that's just going to instantly update there, propagate in the viewport in real time, rather than having to apply in the material editor and all the rest. So you might say, well, what's the point of that? But you can parametrize all of these here. Well, not in this particular case, but in other materials. So you could have parameters to change anything from the amount of tessellation or displacement, to the color, to the roughness, to the metallic, to anything really. You can even convert these to a parameter, and then they'll be exposed in the instance, and then you can just swap out materials, or sorry, swap out textures. So it saves you having to rebuild textures or full materials over and over again. You could just swap out the textures. I'll probably do a video in future showing a better example of instances, but that's pretty much what they are. So with the wind intensity and then the wind weight, remember we painted the vertex colors, we set them up as green. So we're going to use the green channel here, this vertex color node, and that's into the wind weight. And then I just dropped in a tree vector in there. So you just hold down 3 and click, and that's a simple waving grass wind. So this node here, it's not, I don't even think it's doing anything, but I had to add it. If you don't add it in there, you get I'll just alt click and get that error. So it just seems to shut that up, and that's all there is to it, to the wind. You can get more complex with it, and drive it with different parameters, like I showed in the instance, you know, so you can affect it different ways. You can change the way it's moving. It's kind of the procedural nature of whatever mats is being used to drive this can be changed, but I'm not going to show that because I just wanted to keep it quite simple here, and that's it. I suppose that's pretty simple. So remember, in the instance here, you can change the wind. I could even put up to a crazy amount, and I'll just take a second or two to update. So I think I had it set to 0.2, or you can also just press this and that'll reset it back to whatever it is in the master material. So remember, the master material is the parent of the instance, so whatever you do over here will automatically propagate to the instance. But then you can chain these instances, so you can instance the instance, and as I said, I might go into that sort of stuff in a future video. So that's pretty much it. The basics of that there, and you know, you can go into the foliage tool then and paint, add foliage type. I'm just going to drag this down. So that's that plant there, but now I could go into fern 2, and first I'm going to have to double click that back into that and drag that material over here, just to give it that material. Save it, close that down, and back to fern 2, into paint, and drag that in there. So if we click on that, you can see now we can start painting, and they're all painting uniform. You can hold in shift and I'll just erase them. And now we can change the scale factor here, so we can change that to 10, and that's obviously crazy, so just change that to 4, 4, and now we get some variation in the size, and that's a bit big, so I might just change this, say, to 0.5 and 3 or whatever you want, and then that'll give us some sort of, as I said earlier on, natural variation. And you see that nice subsurface effect there, and a little bit of movement or wind. So that's pretty much it there, and I hope this was useful, and I will stop it here, and I'll probably do some more future ones on foliage. Might set up some grass, maybe a more complex kind of plant, and we'll see what happens. Alright then, cheers, thanks, good luck.